Saturday we've had witnessed many transformations, and today we are focusing on changes after failures. Changes in the world of research, changes in a good way or in a bad way, usually after national traumas. Nations and societies try to learn the lessons and find out what didn't work well. But even 2 years after the surprise attack by Hamas, a national commission of inquiry hasn't been established yet. So for those of you who joined us right now, we started today with a workshop for Intel officials, and the topic was changes that are needed in the field of intelligence research and education. And this special night we chose to dedicate to a specific topic, very specific but very important, forming the national assessment of intelligence. We have a rich program with different experts on security and intelligence that will speak based on their perspectives. And before we start, I'd like to invite, I'm honored to invite a professor, the dean of the Social Studies faculty in the Hebrew University of Haifa. Thank you so much. Good evening. Good evening. It's an evening of a day. We hope that when the IDF speaker, we wish that he wouldn't tell us that there's another announcement to families. So we still know that there are about 12 dead hostages that are still in Gaza. All systems have failed, as we know, so I'm really glad that we are gathering here to dedicate time and thought to such an important discussion. It has to do with, we want to understand change following failures. It's the fact that we are all here today is not, we don't take it for granted, and we made a decision here at the university that it is important to us as well to hold discussions about the present and the future that is based on the motto of change following failures, the decision to hold decisions aiming to make an impact and making our voice heard, and the decision to hold activities, a conference with partners. And the fact that this national conference is sponsored or under the auspices of the Davis Institute and the National Security Council, it's all part of a very important cooperation, and we want to establish that connection. So Meir Shalev, the writer who passed away recently, was granted an honorary title from the Hebrew University. He carried a speech here and he said some things that are still relevant today and important to us when we think about the topic of this conference. And I quote, "The days are days of change, days of choice." And the answer is in the book of Deuteronomy. And let us choose life, meaning we should choose Judaism, justice, art. Here in Mount Scopus, the choice is very, very clear to us. This is choosing research and a collaboration between different disciplines and a correction process that acknowledges failure and rises above it. So thank you so much for joining us today. And but as the Dean of the faculty. They asked, let me thank those who organized this evening. Davis Institute, Professor Dalia Press Bar Natan, Dr. Katyovsky, and the Sharon Fadida, Chris Zeev, and thank you for the microphone. I'd like to thank the Institute for the Research of Methodology of Intelligence, headed by Yossi Kuperwasser. Thank you for your partnership and for organizing the second annual conference, to Eidenau Fund in Israel for helping us and making this conference an international one. And thank you to all the participants here, the participants in these discussions, whether you are from Israel and from abroad. We don't take it for granted that people attend academic conferences in Israel. And I also want to talk to you, Doctor, for your cooperation. So let me finish by I wish you all a fruitful conference. I couldn't, I won't be able to attend all of it, but I hope that this partnership will last. It's so important, so crucial, and I think that I wish that this state will be peaceful and that all hostages are brought back. And my wish is also for a peaceful academic year. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to invite Brigadier General, former Brigadier General. Good evening. So I want to start with the last thing. So this is Dr. Ofek from the Israeli Forum. So your presence here shows his contribution to the success of this forum. So well done, Ofek. You actually gave a challenging starting point to Amir Kahana. I'm sure that he will be able to do well. Good luck regarding this evening. So the Institute for the Research of Methodology of Intelligence did not hesitate after October 7th. It was clear to us that we needed to do first, we needed to think why the things that we tried to advance, realizing that there was something going on, something wrong was going on, and we have to think what we should do in a different way so that the system will change in different directions. And so there is a need to change. Many things have changed in the system in the past 2 years, but still, all these changes are based on the system, the people within the system. The idea is to allow the system listen to other directions and to think about the failure and the gap between this failure and the successes in other areas, Houthis and other arenas. I also want to mention the lack of success, ongoing lack of success in the international arena, everything that has to do with struggling with diligent legitimization of Israel. The system has to think hard about what it has done or hasn't done. So you can not only blame others, we always need to look at ourselves and think what we could have done better. So understanding that we need to analyze October 7th in a very thorough way, we invested many efforts in many attempts to look at October 7th from different directions, from different perspectives. We just published a book. Tomorrow we will discuss this book. We will launch the book tomorrow. And so I heard people speaking about the lack of a national commission of inquiry. So it might be something that we can make do in the meantime. We can make do with in the meantime. The practical directions of the institute are reflected in this thing on my right. One of them, the direction we're here, the effort of academization, because we think that the role of the academia beyond training and education and introduction of advanced concept is also help the intelligence hear some critical thoughts about what it does. And it's hard for us to do that. The academia sometimes is a bit hesitant to focus on intelligence matters, and we need somehow to break this deadlock and allow the academia to contribute a bigger contribution to something which is at the heart of Israel's national security. So, and recently there has been an argument regarding the question whether intelligence has a role in giving strategic warning. And there was an article written by two Intel officials, and they say that we should note all of these. So Israel cannot afford ignoring it. So we need to deal with this issue of strategic warning. Today we want to discuss to what extent does the Intel community is involved in the way we conduct our national intelligence assessment. One of the problems is that we don't have an intelligence community. There's no such entity that supervises it all or coordinates everything. We want to know how we can deal with it and create a certain mechanism that can contribute significantly to creating a national assessment, intelligence assessment. There are people here from the National Security Council and other entities. I hope that this message is conveyed, and because everybody understands that this horrible failure that we experienced on October 7th needs to be understood, and we need to do everything in our power to prevent it from happening again. I'd like to thank all the people who were involved in organizing Ofek, and Dudi Simantov has worked very hard preparing for this evening. He took this responsibility upon himself. Ofer Guterman, as the head of academization in the Institute, and many other people from the Institute, and of course our partners at the Davis Institute and at the Hebrew University, Professor Gili Drori and Dalia Press-Barmatan, Hanoch and others who contributed to the success of this evening. And actually, they also made sure that we have a microphone tonight. So they all deserve much appreciation, and this cooperation is not something we take for granted, and we highly appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I wish us all a successful evening. So now I just want to say that today is the 28th of October. You're not confused, but this is a link to tomorrow's program. So that's what I wanted to say. Dr. Guterman, you're welcome. תודה רבה. Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. My purpose in the coming is to actually warm up the atmosphere and to speak about. It's a part of a paper, a bigger paper that we are writing, led by Mr. Simantov at the Methodology Institute in cooperation with other colleagues, in an attempt to analyze the changes. The word reforms is too big, but changes that are needed in the Intel community in Israel following October 7th. So now we want to focus on a segment out of this paper that focuses on a national intelligence assessment and to present, not to tell you what we think, but just offer you some kind of a background. So first of all, let's start with several statements, and I apologize if they are too blunt regarding analyzing the current situation. First, there is no national assessment entity at the national level. So, and I'll go on. I'm sure that most of you understand the context. So there is no entity that is at the national level. There is no real integration of national intel assessment. There is no single place where we see the intel assessment that everybody agrees, things that they agree on and disagree on, and maybe through it we can interpret the gaps, but there are major gaps because there is no integration. There is no intel response to civilian national security issues. So issues that maybe after October 7th, there are several issues such as supply chains, such as competition over emerging technologies and climate changes and food safety. There is no real Intel address. The Intel entities do not address it. There is bias towards operative thinking, operativation of Intel at the expense of strategic Intel, structured, biased towards classified information. Much of it is related to external information, manpower which is not diverse. If we look at different research departments, it might look as if they are diverse, but at the end of the day, so we can speak about the Intelligence Directorate, which is the bigger one, but manpower is not diverse, and there are structured expertise gaps. So there is transition of people and not sufficient focus on development. So if all of these statements make you think in a specific way, maybe the last statement is a bit different from the previous six, and it has to do with the risk of politicization in this era. So in short, if we're looking at what's going on in different countries, there are national assessment entities. In Britain, which is today, for example, is under the NIC or NIC in the United States, under the ODNI, they conduct real national assessment, and as part of it, they also make sure that there is integration, and they are also involved to some extent in leading the national and also professional health of intelligence intelligence analysis, that's another entity. Its role is they actually work with intelligence analysts, and there are very definite criteria, and they are responsible for the guidance. So if we look at the location where the national assessment should be part of, so I think we have to talk about a few tensions. First of all, the basic, one of the deepest tensions between being relevant and politicization. If there will be so if the closer it's to the political echelon, it will be more relevant, but there is a risk of politicization. There is a higher chance that we will speak about the national essential elements of information. So the more, so we want to increase basic thinking, and on the other hand, it could turn into some kind of an ivory tower. And manpower, as I mentioned, should be more diverse, but it can also bring along different gaps. So the higher it is, there might be more integration, but on the other hand, it could trigger objections on the part of the different organizations. So I want to suggest maybe three alternatives. So first of all is to continue with the current situation, not to try to change something or rock the boat, but it's a barrier for politicization. There are assessments conducted at the different organizations, so it's not close to the political echelon. And it's a barrier for politicization, which is a good thing, but at the same time, it also preserve the gaps of qualities. And the other alternative is to establish a certain permanent function, a center or whatever, and quote unquote under the committee of the heads of the agencies, that it will be under the Intel community. And here we will have integration between the different organizations, but it's still also a barrier against politicization, because but on the other hand, it will still preserve the gaps and still preserve gaps of diversity in manpower, and of course there is the well-known dynamics at the different organizations, and you all know that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So over time all the resources will be exhausted. And the third and last alternative is to establish a certain function like the JIC from Britain. It will be in the shape of a certain constellation, and it will actually help us focus on the assessment, but there is risk of politicization. So last slide, I think that the principles that we should adapt or aspire to adapt, first of all, we need to start talking about the broad national security issues, not only security military in the military sense. So I think maybe in the future we'll be able to do that. I think it's very important. Secondly, I think that anyhow we need integration and transparency in terms of disagreement. Even if there is no new entity, each of the agencies must be able to share its insights. So we have to see how it's done, and we need to maintain the independence of this entity and to make sure that there will be external experts together with Intel officials. And of course, accessibility to Intel information, but also real accessibility to academic knowledge and all this external body of knowledge that is currently in the hands of the civilian society. That's it. So this is just the basis towards the panel. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much, Ofer. We are trying to do something about the AC and the temperature here. And now, the main course. You're welcome, all the panelists, you're welcome to the stage. Good evening. Thank you for inviting us. So it's a bit challenging with the AC. I hope you'll make it. So I'd like to congratulate you for reaching this building. So I grew up in Jerusalem in the 80s, and I remember that throughout the city everybody talked about students who get lost in the corridors of the University of Jerusalem, so we felt the same way today. It's very, very difficult to navigate around here, so let me introduce the participants. Former General Farkas, former head of Intel Directorate, former Minister Dan Meridor, and I was also a chair. So former Minister Dan Meridor used to be the Minister of Finance, Minister of Intelligence, Minister of Justice, and the Secretary of the Government. And Miri Eisin, former Brigadier General. Today she is part of the Intelligence Center at Reichman University. She had several roles in Intel Directorate. And you also worked with, and of course, Eyal Hulata. He used to be, it feels as if it was such a long time ago. He used to be the head of National Security Council during Bennett and Lapid's administration, and he has served in senior positions in Mossad. So clearly it was also something that was evident that was not here in this morning, but Ofer and Cooper talked about the broader context before we address the Ofer's presentation. So we've had 2 years of war, and they probably ended 2 weeks ago. Professor Drori talked about the good news and the bad news, but there aren't great news tonight. Still, it's a very stressful time, and we hear about different casualties almost every night, and I have a feeling that we reached so the 20 living hostages are back. It's a kind of a ceasefire, but it's far from being a stable period. While we are speaking, the Chief of Staff was supposed to meet today with the members of the Turjuman Committee. It's a kind of investigation, military investigation, IDF investigation. And of course, October 7th is a great failure. Major part of it is due to derives from the intelligence aspect. So we have been living here in Israel for the past 2 years, and I want to remind you that what Chief of Staff Zamir talks about in the IDF, he is put most of the responsibility on the Intel. And actually, he believes that the Intel directorate, or the Intel part or sector failed or are responsible. So the generals did not have much of a chance. I think that they're trying to let them off the hook, but we must remember that many share these sentiments. So I don't want to call it the elephant in the room, but this is the shadow that is above us. So I want to tell Cooper that 50 years are not sufficient. So every year there have been many articles and books that were published about Yom Kippur War, and now there is a new trauma for us to discuss. So now I'd like to start with the same question for the four of you, and I want you to talk about this tension between different elements. You didn't say that in so many words, but you mentioned the DNI, which was described as one of the solutions, and maybe we need an Israeli variation of it. And so together, I don't want to offend anyone, but we have more than 100 years of intelligence experience. Hulata is the youngest one. He called me Chief Intelligence Officer. So there's lots of experience here amongst us, so I'll be glad to hear your input about it, and we'll take it from there. So, thank you. I'll be tough with the time though. 5 minutes, please. So, first of all, I'm so glad that we are all here tonight. I saw the 7 failures that were presented, I think in the slide, and then recommendations what to do to correct them. So I must say that I can live with that, but will it change the situation? I'm not quite sure. I'd like to tell you that in 2004, I had the privilege to meet with Ambassador Ponte. He actually established the National Intelligence Entity in the US, and he came here to learn from us how we do integration. The whole world wanted to learn from us. I'm speaking about 2004. And some of the recommendations of Ofer's are very much similar to that. So there are such entities. And as a result, I think that the problem and the solution is that do not have to do with the organization. I wrote several points and I'd like to describe them. I don't like talking about changes following failures. It's a mistake. It's a failure to talk about changes following failures. There are so many successes to intelligence, many more than failures. And I agree that it was a horrible failure on October 7th, on Yom Kippur, and on October 2023. These were failures, I'm not denying it. And the failure is about surprise. And a year earlier, I had an argument with the one who served as the head of Intel Directorate in 8200, and I asked him, how come the word warning is missing? 8200 was supposed to be the leading cyber unit in the world, so I asked them, why do you need to do that, to be the leading unit? Why? To enhance Israeli high-tech? So I think that changes should occur on an ongoing basis. We need to think about the things that we need to correct. So over time, we forget to implement what we agreed on. And second point, The duty of warning is not evident on a daily basis. So this week I gave a lecture to a course of chief intelligence officer, 330 of them, many of them. And one of the things that I was trying to convey to them is that the realization that we need to wake up every morning and feel that you have a duty to warn, it's not simple. And this is what they are asked to do. And the need for warning is not evident, and there are senior and junior officers who believe that there is no need for warning anymore. I want to tell you that there was a strategic warning because the arenas converged in 2023. What did they do with it? I saw the letters that were written in order to present the convergence of the different arenas. There was no tactical warning on 6/29 though. I have another minute.
So I think
that these are the directions that I want to point at. There are 6, and I give you the titles. I want to respect the time limit. So first of all, I think that the nature of the people and their appointment is the most critical thing in intelligence. The personality of the person you appoint. Secondly, to give room for initiative, not to oppress it, and not to kill the person who tried to initiate. Initiative that challenges the status quo should be evident all the time. So there was even the officer for 8200 and others, but do not kill initiative. Professionalism of the relationship between Intel and the leaders and the political echelon. And even though the Prime Minister wants to claim something, we need to do that. Sharon once told me, Farkash, it's time you think about the Jews, not only the Palestinians. Prime Minister Sharon. I always talked about the Palestinians. There should be the ability to move in different directions and between the different entities that are responsible for making decisions. Junior officers should be allowed to say what they have to say wherever it's critical, and we should let them speak. When I was the head of Intel Directorate, they told me they will never invite people, junior officials. I said, I want to change that. I want to hear the junior officers as well. One last point, I think that there is, it feels that there are other players in the region. We don't understand well enough what the US is trying to do, and obviously we don't understand Russia and China, and we cannot understand what's going on here without understanding these superpowers. Thank you so much. Good evening. We're meeting here at the University, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary. So let me start with that. Because, of course, I won't be able to refer to all the different points, but I want to speak about the role of the attempt, the academic involvement in decision-making. That's the interface between politics and practical matters. And let me start at the place that was mentioned by Farkash. It's important who the people are more than anything else. I remember government meetings, and Farkash was here to present as the head of the Intel Directorate. I'm not telling you any secrets that weren't revealed. So I remember Farkas participating in cabinet meeting with Sharon, Prime Minister, and I used to read the intelligence materials and I knew what Farkas was about to say. So Sharon did not want him to mention a certain point. But I want to tell you, and I should give Farkas credit for that, that he was very stubborn. And when he was asked about the appointment of Mossad people, when I was asked, I said the main characteristic, besides being smart and honest, you need to have the ability to say to your superior what they don't want to hear. So let's say there is a very fair people with a political agenda of his own. The role of the professional system and the intel system is to describe the alternatives, the risks, the prices to be paid, and other people hear that, and the Prime Minister doesn't want other people to hear that. So very often I saw this conflict between professionalism, so the head of Intel Directorate can also be wrong. It's also possible, of course, but vis-a-vis the political echelons, they should be able to express their opinion. And by the way, this always should be critical. Intelligence is very critical here. So that's one of the things that I think we have to think about when we speak about the interface between political and professional echelons and who conducts the intel assessment for the decision makers. The second thing I'd like to say in this context, those who make the decisions in a democratic state are not professionals. They are politicians who were elected, and this is how it should be. A person is not elected because he's suitable or he is an expert on security, on economy or whatever. No, because they are charismatic. And the question is, how do you bridge between the fact that they are politicians and the need to actually use experience and know-how? If it were a commercial company, they would make sure that the professional element is there. If Tiva company wants to produce a new medication, they need to know all there is to know. So there is a tension here. There is a tension that recently reached a very problematic level. First of all, these people are elected by the public. And secondly, we can say maybe the politicians, without being a politician, you won't be able to lead the public. So Menachem Begin, if he had asked whether to pursue the peace agreement with Egypt, and actually, so he had a certain ideology, but he needed to sign a peace agreement with a dictator. And if he had asked the public, I'm sure that it wouldn't have been implemented. So whether he was right or wrong, he did what he thought was the right thing without consulting with the public. By the way, as I told you first, there are juniors and seniors, and I'm a senior, but I'm not that old. But the idea that the one who makes the decision needs to rely on the academia, on know-how, this whole concept is being challenged around the world today. The connection to discourse. So people don't want to, they're not patient. On TikTok, nobody talks, about something which is really deep. And this is how elections are won. Look at countries in Europe, look at what's going on in other places. I'm not even speaking about Israel because I don't want to go into politics. You are elected nowadays because you actually always talk about what the others are missing. Intellectual discourse has almost vanished, and people do not appreciate it anymore. As one of the presidents said, who needs generals at all? I can fight a war without them. So going back to what I said earlier, the academia, the resuming professional, intellectual, unbiased discourse is so important. At the end, there will be a decision by the people who were elected, but first we need to know what's going on. We need to get to know reality, and I think that nowadays is not. It doesn't happen, and populism, is very dominant. So dictators were populist, but the question is whether you work with whether you emphasize values and education, or maybe you lead the public to a place that they could have reached without you. And I speak about the connection between the political echelon and the intel echelon. One more comment about structure. We live in an era of change. So the changes are very important. I was asked to mediate between the head of Shabak and the head of Mossad, and I have told Diskin, Meridor, and Yadlin, and we talked about, and Meir said, I don't want to have a discussion with the head of Intel Directorate. I want to have a discussion only with the Chief of Staff. On those days, there were two major security challenges, the Iranian nuclear program and another one, and terror. So Shabak was responsible for terror, nuclear was, the Mossad was responsible for them. They have different roles, but there has been major change. You all remember that the operation of with the pagers, it was based on an intel investigation. The nature of war is changing. Whether our intelligence entities adapted, if the Shabak wants to wants to listen to me or detain me or follow me, there is supervision. I want to protect my own rights as a civilian, but I don't think that the rights of Simwar should be maintained. But when there's Gaza Strip, which is the land of the enemy, so they actually trying to harm Israeli citizens. So it's all a mix. Should the agents in Gaza be recruited by 504 or Shabak? I think that all of these entities are should are based on a separation between the different entities, and we need to think about it really, really hard. Threat can come from other places in the world. We need to think about reorganization, and today, so we need to think. So for the intel community to be effective, we need to conduct a few changes. So I was intelligence minister in the past, and I focused on that, and so there were 10 major decisions that were approved by the Minister of Defense and the Prime Minister, how to integrate and get access to the intelligence assessment, how to use technologies. So we tried to investigate it or research it, but the world has changed and Intel should change as well, and I'm not sure that the Intel community is established in the right way. In the right way. It's so nice to speak after these intelligent people. 3 points that I thought of. The first point. After October 7th, is there anyone here that believes that we don't need change, that change is not necessary. 2 years have passed, and we know that we did something wrong. But the fact that 2 years have passed, what used to be evident in the past, now it's related to what you mentioned. Eventually, the world has changed. Do we look into the future, or do we want to correct the mistake? It's beyond correcting, beyond mistake. It's a huge failure. So this is a big statement, because what I'm saying is that obviously we need to change. And then I say, as a fly on the wall, Dan sat there. Farkas was there as the head of Intel Directorate. Eyal was there as the head of the National Security Council. I was in this cabinet. I was in this cabinet's room. I was the fly on the room, on the wall, and the fly on the walls are the one who sit at the back that nobody pays attention to, and the ones who do not make decisions, but the ones who actually write down comments during the discussions. So we actually used pen and pencil. I'm speaking about the possibility to make thorough change, and instead of being Don Quixote and trying to fight the mills, I think that it's very, very difficult to make changes. So at the end of the day, we want to initiate a discourse. So first of all, let's do what we're doing well. So it's not as if at the past it was bad and now it was bad and now it's good. It was clear to me on October 7th that if I had been in my role, it would happen to me as well. So when we say there are so many people that are foreigners that say, well, it wouldn't happen in my shift, and I want to challenge it. And let me tell you one story about it. So does it have to do with gender? No, I am a woman. Yeah, that's right. So on October 5th, 2023, there was a panel on TV in English that focused on the 50th anniversary of Yom Kippur's war, and I spoke about intelligence. And of course, they actually, it was live TV in English, 50th anniversary. And they asked me the first question: could the intelligence of October 6, 1973 happen again? They asked me this question on October 5th, 2023, 7:30 p.m. I have a recording if you don't believe me. And I said, absolutely, tomorrow morning. It can happen. That's what I said. But the fact that you're saying that 50 years are not enough, but in my eyes, within the intelligence profession, there is so many built-in failures. And what happened on October 7th is the biggest failure. You talked about strategic or warning, tactical failure, operative failure. And excuse me, the failures, operational failures were huge as well. Apropos genders, as much as I remember, since there have been 47 investigations. Who conducted these investigations? Who looks at himself? So who will change? It's just add to the previous point. And the last one I want to make in this context is true. So I speak about two topics. First of all, is diversity. Diversity is not just being a lady sitting here, because obviously when they planned the panel, they noticed that there was no woman, so they invited me. So there is even one. Who would they invite? It's a challenge. I also speak, coherently, so that helps. So about diversity is, as you mentioned, It's not a bad thing because you bring to the table other perspectives. You talk about things in a different way. You don't have, to revolutionize everything. You can make minor changes. Think about this. So first of all, diversity, and it's again, diversity is not about gender. It's diversity in the room. Is not to give the same answer to the question, to look at things from different perspectives, to challenge your thought, and the challenge of bring people who know how to make it happen. And the second topic that I feel is a deep cultural challenge, and I'm speaking about the intelligence culture because the military culture that I'm very, very familiar with. So I can see former commanders of mine, they're all here in this room, but I'm saying, I want to tell you about ourselves. Do we really know how to accept, criticize? Can we really change? Don't we always think that it would have been better if, and I think that we do not know how to look at things in Israeli culture. So even today, 2 years after, so they are going to blame intelligence for everything. Why? Because nobody actually, what's the problem for me as a woman to say I at 6:29 in the morning I made a mistake, Miri, and I saw the border of Gaza, and I also said give them money, it will be okay. So I was wrong exactly as everyone else. I thought that the focus should be given to Hezbollah, but at the end we saw that Hamas was the one that attacked us. It's a deep change that is needed because at the end of the day, this culture within our system does not change. I look at the system 2 years after, and here mainly I speak, I mainly speak about Intel Directorate, but also Mossad and Shabak. And ladies and gentlemen, there's no time like the present. We should develop ideas in a different way. This is the time. These were my comments, and now let's hear from Eyal. So you said that it's hard for you to speak after the two of them. Now it's much more difficult to speak after you. So I want to start. I want to bring up several points. The first one related to what Miri said. When we spoke earlier about the end of my role, really, by the way, really 9 months, I ended my role on January 9th, and I know exactly when I ended my role, when my role ended, I'm sorry, but I'm mainly thinking about the question, what did I leave behind? Because you're totally right, Farkash. Corrections and changes should be done, not just a moment after the failure, but on an ongoing basis. What exactly haven't we done? So 9 months after my role ended, everything collapsed. And so what's my responsibility? And I'm starting with these points because I think that they are the most important ones. So I'd like to start. I think that I remember the points as you presented, and I want to say first that, first of all, I don't know what you're gonna write in your paper, but I think that the establishment of a DNI is the last thing that Israel needs. I'll explain, but I also tell you what I think that we should do. So, but if we look at it, at this conclusion of intelligence integration, and I read the report of the Agranat Committee, Cover to Cover, so if there is a main conclusion 52 years ago, because back then there was integration, there was the national assessor, I believe they call it, as the head of Intel Directorate has this role, and they explained to me that the head of the Intel Directorate is the only one who are entitled to present the slides. So this was the situation 52 years ago, but we know that we need pluralism, and if there, which means that there's a need for different opinions, and I don't want to actually I want the heads of the Intel entities to be able to present their own opinions. And the result, even if we don't see everything, right? I don't remember that the Agranat committee talked about the responsibility of the different entities on the other way around. So I suggest not to forget this point. Ofer, you didn't talk about it much, but I'm taking this responsibility, this opportunity to talk about it. Intel is important, but it's not everything. Let's refer to there is another component that it's the situational assessment. So we do it along the way. So I'm not a chief intel officer, and I'd like to remember that. But I know that this important component is very important to decision making. I also read that in the reports that you wrote. At the end, when the political echelon makes a decision, if they think they make a decision based on the classified intel, there's no chance that it happens like that. It's true that intel is right very often, but the reason that we remember that intel can also be wrong is that when it's wrong, everybody feels it. So earlier we have a discussion. We talked about 51 years. I'll be glad if we won't have another failure for another 51 years. I was not born 51 years ago, I must tell you that. I'm just afraid that it will happen to us much sooner than that, in 10 years or so. That's my concern. We don't really learn anything. We will repeat the same mistakes because we did not learn what our problems were. We are busy blaming all sorts of people, but although it's very difficult and we all feel it, there's no doubt that Intel failed here. But the biggest failure of the situational assessment, the bigger failure is the failure where someone was willing to believe to the chief intel officer that warned him, and I know that it didn't happen. Israeli intelligence became operational intelligence. We actually forgot many basic capabilities. Farkash mentioned it, but it's even worse that we convince ourselves that we have intel superiority. And I remember myself saying, well, pardon my French, what the fuck is going on? There's no such thing. Yeah, they wrote so many essays were written about it, so there's no wonder we were wrong. But when you conduct a situational assessment, you should to look at reality, to remember that they're not accountable. The one who is accountable is the chief of staff. He perceives himself as a tactician, but he is the one projecting force, and we were convinced we know everything. And if the political echelon checked or did not check because they had the situational assessment in 23 or not, so we'll have to look into it at some point. You'll have to ask questions, and it bothers me a lot. So it bothers the inquiry commissions as well. So Agranat Commission stated that it should be handled, but nobody listened to it. And Vinograd Committee also stated that. So there was an entity that was responsible for that, not integrate the intel, but there was the National Security Council. There is a reason why integration is needed, because the information is coming from down there. At the end, the political echelons needs to take responsibility, to prioritize, to define the reference scenario. For that purpose, we need integration. So we don't need to establish a new entity. It already exists, the National Security Council. That's the topic of my next question. Yes. Okay, you can finish here. Thank you so much. You don't have to give me the microphone. Okay. So I want to ask two other short questions. There is a question that was in the air. Farkash, Miri, and Eyal talked about it. It's the question of officials without, naming the people, but all of you implied that it has to do with the different officials and they were very confident of themselves. And the question is, I heard seniors that left Intel director, they talked about narcissist culture. Isn't that part of the story that also added to technology and supremacy? So this is a question for the both of you. And for Dan and Farkas, another question. One of the questions, and forgive me for calling it the Israeli DNI, but I want to tell you, I want to ask about the interface. So it's not only professional matters that it, they started discussing it after the Rosenfeld affair. So we need an Intel officer. So please, based on your rich experience, talk about these interfaces. And I'll give you two examples. First is the Immigration Administration. They thought about Africa as a possibility. And the second question, we saw heads of Intel organizations that are being trialed and they're trying to convince that they are called, that they are summoned to court and explain to the judges that a certain hearing should be postponed. So let me try to answer the second question. Two anecdotes, first of all. Politicization is a very sensitive word. And I'd like to say, and especially now, we all know. So, designing an Intel assessment in accordance with the answer you want to give your boss is not politicization. I am familiar with the American DNI ever since 2007. I've had direct interaction with them. And it's true that they anticipated the war in Ukraine, and they've had many successes, and maybe it's true. And if they also missed what happened in Afghanistan earlier, and there are reasons, because whether they liked it or not, they understood what the policy was. And when the policy is clear, it's as if it's almost impossible to be part of the president's staff, the White House, attend discussions, understand the directive that he wants to apply, and you look for the answers you want to hear. So we need to differentiate between intel assessment and situational assessment. It's crucial. Regarding the first question, so there is a paradox here, because officials that are not strong enough will find it very difficult to avoid this temptation. There's a need for someone who can actually confront the political echelon and insist. Mayor Dagan used to be like that. But still he was a narcissist. Okay, so
זאת אומרת,
what?
אני חושב
So I
שהפער
think that
בעניין
the
הזה
gap
הוא
here
לא רק כמה
is
חזק
not
האדם,
only how
אלא
strong a
היכולת
person
שלו
is,
להקשיב וללמוד
but
אחורה.
his
אני
ability
זכיתי
to
להיות
really listen, to be
הסמל הראשון
attentive.
שמקבל את
I
הזכות להיכנס
was the
לחדר של ראש
one
מוסד מאיר דגן,
who
להגיד כל מה
actually
שהוא חושב,
spoke with the head of
וכאילו
Mossad,
האיש
Meir
הזה,
Dagan,
עדיין
uh,
אנרכיסט.
and I was allowed
לכן
to speak.
הסיפור הזה של פלורליזם
So I think that
בתוך הארגונים,
pluralism within the
המוכנות לשמוע
organization,
דעות
the
אחרות בתוך
willingness to
הארגונים,
hear other
המוכנות
opinions, the
לשמוע
willingness to
דעות שונות וגם
listen to other
לחפש
opinions and
את
to
האנשים
look for
המופרעים האלה
the
שמסתובבים שם ולא להוציא
people
אותם מהגדר כדי שהם יכולים להיכנס לתוך
and
הגופים.
not to
זה
kick
הסיפור
them
הגדול
out. So
בעניין.
that's the
ואני חושב שבאופן
most important
פרדוקסלי,
thing. And
לאנשים
in
חזקים
a
יותר קל לעשות את זה מאשר אני
paradoxical
ואחרים.
way,
אם אני מפחד ממשהו,
stronger
זה אלה
people
שרק
find
נראים
it
חזקים.
hard.
וצריכים לפצות
They
על
also
בעיות
sometimes
הביטחון האחרים
find it
שלהם, לפצות
hard
בכל מיני
to
מנגנונים
do. It's
פופוליסטיים
also a matter of
ואחרים.
self-confidence,
בסוף התוצאה היא
but at
שאנרכיסט לא
the
יכול להיות
end,
האנשים שאומרים את מה שהם
the
רוצים לשמוע,
result is
ואז
that
נותן אותה
people
באיילון.
like to work
זה ניסיוני.
with, tend to make sure they
אין לי
work
הרבה מה
with people
להוסיף,
with
כי
similar
אייל הציג את
opinions.
זה בצורה מאוד
I don't
מלאה.
have much to add because Eyal
טוב,
said
אני
it
שואל
all,
שאלה. אני
but
שואל שאלה.
I'm asking,
כי אני, כל
I'm
חיי הגדולים
different.
בתוך המערכת שבתוכה הייתי,
Throughout my
I
career,
was the outsider.
I was the outsider.
ואני אומרת את
And
זה לא
I'm
בצורה
saying
רעה.
that not in a
אני
bad
אומר את זה
way.
כי
I'm
לעיתים זה
saying
אומר
that
שצריך
because
לדעת לעבוד
sometimes it
ביחד עם מי
means
שנמצאים.
that you need to know how
כי
to
אני
work
חושב
with the
שבסופו
people
של דבר,
around you. Because I think that
התרבות
eventually culture,
הישראלית,
Israeli
הרבה יותר
culture,
הישראלית, אבל הביטחונית,
or the
שבתוכה
security
יש לנו
culture
פנימית,
that
כוללת
includes the
בתוכה,
intelligence culture.
אני אגיד את זה אחרת,
Let me
בסדר?
put it this way.
ואחד
I'll
הדברים
put
שהייתי
it
אומר
differently.
יותר
This is
פוליטיקאים,
one of the
וגם
things
לא
that
חשבתי
I
עליו
used
בתור
to say
פוליטיקאי,
about
ואני לא חושב על זה
politicians.
בתור דבר
And I
רע, כן?
don't think of it
אבל
as a
אני
bad
בחיים לא
thing,
הייתי
but
מוכן להיות
I
פוליטיקאי.
I could never be a
עבדתי בתוך לשכת
politician.
רוה"מ,
I worked in the
לפעמים
Prime
אמרתי, איך
Minister's
אפשר להיות
office,
כאילו,
and I always asked
לדעת,
myself,
ללכת
how
באיזה
can you
דרך,
actually
ולא
follow this
לשאול
path
כל הזמן,
without
מה כן,
asking,
מה לא,
constantly
ולכן
asking
אני שואל,
questions?
אני
Because
אומר
I'm
את
a
זה,
person who likes to
ואני
ask
חושב
questions.
שהתרבות הזו
And I think
שמביאה
that
בן
this
אדם
culture
שיש
that
לו אמת
leads a
פנימית
person who is
ומאמין בה
very
והולך עם
authentic
אידיאולוגיה,
and believes in a certain
וצריך אנשים אחרים
ideology,
שיש להם
and
את עמוד
he
שדרה להכיר
needs
בקיצוניות
the
שלהם
other
ולדבר
people
לא
around him
בשפה של
with the
כולם, היכולת
backbone
הזו היא לא
to
פשוטה,
express their
וחסרים לנו
opinions.
אנשים כאלה
And we
במערכת,
miss people
ואנחנו
like that
דוחים אותם
in the
החוצה.
system. We kick them
ואנחנו לאו
out
דווקא כי זה
and we
נורא
push
קשה
them
להיות
aside
בתוך
because
זה,
it's very
בסופו של
difficult.
דבר הם לא רוצים לומר
So
להם, גם אני
obviously it's
הלכתי
not a better.
החוצה,
I also
כי נורא קשה
was
להיות
pushed aside
בפנים,
because
כל
it's
הזמן זה
very
קצת
hard
בצד וקצת בחוץ,
to be in there.
ואני בסוף,
So at the end,
בוודאי מאז שהשתחררתי,
especially ever since I
תמיד
was
מרגישה שמביאים אותי
discharged,
לתוך דיונים בתוך המערכת,
I
כדי
always
שאני
feel
אביע
that
דעה
they
אחרת,
asked me to
ושכולם
join
ירגישו טוב,
discussions so
שישמעו
that I
כיוון
will express a
ריאלי
different
ואובייקטיבי.
opinion, so that people
אז
will feel
רציתי
good
את
about
דעתי,
myself, that
כי
they
אני באה
allow
ממקום אחר, מקום אחר,
other
מקום בצורה
people
הזו,
to
כי
express
התרבות
themselves,
הארגונית אומרת
because the
שצריך,
culture
והם רוצים
says, and
לשמוע דעה אחרת,
they
אבל לא
want to
רוצים
hear
לקבל
different
אותה.
opinion, but they don't
ואני
want
מדבר על זה
to
שיש
make
איזו סביבה
decisions in
שכל אחד
accordance
צריך
with
להגיד
that.
אותה,
So first of all,
ובסוף
this is
לאנשים
something we
שיש
should be
יש
aware
אנשים,
of, and I think
כמו
that there are
מאיר דגן,
people,
זה
and Meir
באמת
Dagan
מהבחינה
was
הזו
really such a
דוגמה.
person.
אני
It's
לא
a good
חושב שזו
example.
דוגמה היחידה,
I don't think that it is the
וזה
only
אולי יותר
example,
קל ונוח, הוא
but
איננו, אנחנו יכולים לדבר עליו
so
שוב פעם,
we
אבל
can speak
יש
about,
אנשים כאלה
but there
בתוך
are
המערכת שאתה
people
באמת
within the
מרגיש
system
שהם
now
יקבלו את
that you
ההחלטה
really
הזאת
feel
והם
that they will
מקשיבים לך.
make a
ואני
decision, but
אומר
they
את זה
really
בתור אחד
listen to you. And I'm
ששנתיים
saying that
העוזרת של בוגי,
for 2 years I
וכתור
was the
שמע
assistant of
והעיניים שלו,
Bogi,
ואני חושב
and I feel
שלבוגי כן
that
היה את
Bogi
התכונה הזו,
had
ויחד עם זאת
this
זה לא אומר שהוא היה
uh,
משקל וידע לקבל דעות
characteristic,
אחרות.
but
אני
still
אומר,
he was not
זה
an easy man
דורש
to work
הרבה
with.
מאוד עמוד
So
שדרה
it takes a
להקשיב
real
לאחרים, אבל
backbone
אחרי זה גם
to
לשנות
listen
את
to
הדעה.
other people and also to
וצריכים
change
שני
your
חלקים
mind. It's a
שחסרים.
huge thing that I think that many officials are missing. So I'd like to, maybe it's related to what Miri said about politicians. If you are in the government and they make a decision about, I don't know, a military operation, I was never willing to only rely on what the professionals say. So in the military system and intelligence system, I was never blocked. I was a member of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. I always wanted to know what was happening. It's not that I don't trust the head of Mossad or Intel Directorate or Chief of Staff. I know I had responsibility. And I don't want to cause, harm to anyone. And that's why, so I agree with what Miri said, what the previous speaker said about National Security Council, that people need to learn. The public do not appreciate it. The public appreciates something else. So people who makes a decision in the government should know how to ask the right questions. So at the end, there was a law initiated by the National Security Council. So I think it was Benny Begin who proposed it.
יכול להיות, אני חושב שבני הציע אותו, אבל אני לא נתון מבעליו, מישהו עשה יבורה, כי הייתה יושבת ממשלה.
So the government used to make a decision about, for example, the healthcare basket. But there was a discussion, Ynet was against, the Haaretz newspaper was in favor, so it could be different senior officials, and you were sitting there, and if you don't know the background, you want to know what questions to ask. So I think that we should place great importance. So I'll give you two examples from our history. Menachem Begin wanted to bomb the reactor in Iraq. He did not conceal it, but the head of Intel Directorate and head of Mossad objected to it. I was not there, but there were many discussions there. But actually, so other people decided on Oslo Accord, but they didn't ask intelligence system. So I'm not, but the process was conducted in a wrong way. They invested lots of money so that they'll have more intelligence. They'll end up with more intelligent decisions, and sometimes they just did not do it the right way. So only on behalf of Intel Directorate. So you mentioned Meir and also Pardo. They actually were able to express their opinion even if the government did not agree with them. So he spoke his mind. My opinion was exactly the opposite. The ability to insist is so important. So the politician should be willing to speak, to hear, and not to think they know everything or that what they say is not important. So I'll give you a bad example. It's related to what we discussed earlier. So I'm not saying that intelligence is not accountable, but I'm familiar many of people in the. So I know the chief of staff and I know Ronen Bar from Shabak. These were excellent people. So I don't know. You said that it could have happened to you as well. So maybe you're right, because it happened to excellent people. So there was a political echelon that made a legitimate decision not to conquer Gaza, not to kill Sinwar, and Olmert, not only Netanyahu, Olmert, Lapid, and that was their decisions as well. So maybe they thought that they could have reached an agreement with them, maybe with the money with Qatar, because the alternative did not seem that attractive. But I just want to speak about a certain thing. In the business world, it's called risk management. So if you do risk management, there is 10% that things will go wrong. The Hamas is the same organization with the ideology according to which they want to destroy us. So you are the chief of staff, minister of defense, prime minister, and there is a discussion. So you should ask whether you have sufficient humans, sufficient number of agents. So they have to ask themselves what are the plans, but it's not about because someone wrote about it. We should hold discussions because there is a horrible risk. Maybe something will not happen, but you have to be very thorough. Why did they build this underground city in Gaza, and what will happen if they attack us? Because the failure of defense in this case was not less intense than the failure of intel. So actually warning can fail, like in Yom Kippur war, like Pearl Harbor. That's why we need defense as well. So if there were only one more battalion there, things could have been so different on October 7th. You should not assume that everything was wrong. No, they just did not manage the risk in the right way. Risk management is critical here. I was not there at the time, but maybe I would say the same thing that our politicians said, but they should have their eyes opened. So what's the problem? The political echelon made this decision, and the military echelons actually they needed to do risk management. Intel as well, head of National Security Council as well, they did not manage the risk adequately. So if, for example, they had been just one battalion there, it could have made all the difference. I heard in the media that Sinwar asked his people in the morning whether the Jews were prepared or not. So it's not as if everything was wrong. The system worked, but the warning failed, defense failed. So, and you hear the different stories on the radio. It's horrible. So risk management is something we should adapt, and by politicians and professionals alike, because you can always go wrong, and nothing is 100%. There's no 100% certainty. Political echelon should learn its lessons as well. I left the government in 2013, and the ministers actually had no clue about the situation, and they weren't aware of the plans of the different assessments, because they couldn't care less, they weren't interested. So the question is, how do you create incentive for people to investigate, to learn? So they need to respect and really benefit from the professional echelon and challenge it. So other speakers talk about mechanisms. So I read the Agranat committee report, and I read it. So there were conclusions related to integration. They spoke about 2 centers that will conduct a separate assessment, and it will reduce the risk of failure. So I think that Mossad and Intel Directorate and Shabak should work together. So in terms of assessment, they should work separately. So there should be actually the professional echelon should be courageous enough, and risk management should be conducted. Yes, we have to finish soon. So I would ask one question, and I want everybody to ask the same question at the government ministries and the IDF and Shabak and Mossad. What is the scope of damage if I'm wrong? What is the scope of damage if I'm wrong? If you know that, you'll decide what to do to prevent. So it's true that it's difficult. The state of Israel actually
אבל אני חושב
I
שזו
think
שאלה
that it's a
שחובה
question
לוודא
that we
ששואלים אותה
must
בדיונים שצריך לקבל
ask
החלטה.
in different discussions before decisions are made. Well, we'll have time for some questions later, but I want to add, in continuation to what was said earlier here, so you mentioned Herzi and Ronen, so two comments. The classic book about the American failure in Vietnam describes the wonderful group around Kennedy and Johnson, but still they failed. The best and the brightest, the Israeli ones, to some extent did the same. But here I want to make a comment. You might think it's gossip, but maybe the harmony that exists, and you just mentioned it, between the head of Shabak and chief of staff was a bit too much. And in light of the protests, of the reservists, etc., so maybe they needed to work vis-a-vis the prime minister, but you could actually, I'm not sure that the harmony was in place. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, please. Do you want me to come closer or? Yes. Guy, I'm at Ofer's course, intelligence course. You said you talked about the ability of the intelligence, and you talked about, in Ofer's essay, you said that operative intelligence helps the military in the battlefield. Could it be that the solution to the problem that we don't always know 100% is to be always prepared to defend with greater amount of conscripts? Because there are people in Israel who do not serve. That's it, that's my question. Hold on. So the Israeli market today, when they made the decision about warning as one of the three of the pillars of security, today, okay, it was the decision were made, ages ago, but today we are 10 million already. Another question, yes. I'm from the history department, Dani Arbach. My question is whether you feel that we should think that there should be a differentiation between different arenas because new ones appear like Turkey. So maybe if we don't differentiate between the different arenas, it would be better. Okay, and of course it's also it's because of the composition of the panel. So we refer to security as a military, but you talked a little bit about diversity, but I want to ask whether you think that the public, civil society have a role. Well, of course, you can blame them for what happened. That's a good idea. Yeah, like a scapegoat. Yes, so who wants to go first? So, I don't know to what extent the situation is different today, but it really depends on the leader, the prime minister, how he uses all the tools at his disposal. And I remember that David Ivri and Giora Island were in your role, and when they reached to sensitive things, the prime minister would ask them to go outside for a while. So I think that the major part of the things that were written here on the slide referred not only to intelligence, but also referred to decision makers, and I think that it's a crucial point when you look at using intelligence, decision making. You don't hear a lot about it, or we don't want to hear about it. And the prime minister once told me, so he called me after an incident. He actually told me, you'll be able to say whatever you want, but then there was this matter around Lebanon,
והוא אמר
and
לי,
he told me.
קרא לי אחרי שהדיון
So he called me
נגמר,
after the discussion ended,
ונכנסתי אליו,
and
אחרי שהוא
I
ביקש
went to
שיכניסו
see
לו
him
5
after
פיתות עם זה.
he
הוא
asked
שאל
people
אותי,
to give him 5
כן,
pitas.
הוא אמר
Ariel
לי,
Sharon, he liked to
אתה
eat.
בטוח
So he asked me, are you sure
שאתה מסתכל
that
מסביב
you're
מי
looking
נמצא כשאתה אומר
around
מה שאתה
at
חושב.
who's there?
אז הוא
Okay,
אומר,
make
אתה
sure
תגיד
that
מה
you
שאתה
look
חושב, אבל
around and
תסתכל מי
see
נמצא
who
מסביב.
is there before you express your opinion. There was a fascinating question in relation to the tension. So I'm going to answer the students from the second year. There is no budget and there's no ability to do everything. So it goes back to arenas. Eventually, you cannot look at everything all the time. The blanket is too narrow. You have to prioritize. And the ones who do that are the decision makers. It's not us. It's not us from Intel. We just make recommendations. So in my eyes, well, there is a movie, idiotic movie that I really like, World War Z, zombies taking over. So the city defends itself against the zombies because they build the tallest wall. And I love this movie. Why? Because at the end, people climb over the wall. So whatever you prepare for, it will never be enough. And it goes back to risk management that we talked about earlier. So you have to make decisions and prioritize. You cannot, have 17 battalions in Judea and Samaria and another 24 in Gaza. No, you have to make decisions. It's part of the problem. And I really relate to the idea, but I think that in this context, the perception always changes. But eventually the question is how you look at, I don't like the word enemies, it's a bit problematic, but how you look at the environment and the interaction. Arena doesn't mean that only you look at it specifically, because you want to get more and more professional. And eventually you get professional if you know something thoroughly, and then you want all to speak the same language. But it's not a contradiction. So I want to add one more thing. The world is changing, and the offense changes. At first, so you're starting to adapt intelligence-dependent offense. So you not want to destroy all the tanks of the enemy, you just try to choose the right, most crucial targets. But in order to do that, you need intelligence. So the military consumes intelligence. So the role of assessment and alert is one, and now we want to attack precisely the target, not to activate everything. So you remember the example with the pagers. Is what the Americans are now going to do. They send the unit, they send the UAVs. So you know how to identify the logic of the enemy. So you need lots of intelligence, but you need to be cautious. So it's a different function from the function you discussed earlier. We need to bear it in mind and not to forget about it. So I'm not going to talk on and on about it, but you asked a question earlier about, I wanted to say something, but obviously it's not that important. And the intelligence should change as the world changes. So of course, warning is very, very important, very crucial. But eventually we need intelligence that will serve the purpose. And another comment, yeah, I remembered what I want to say. Why not to draft more? So risk management also includes economic risk. After 73, with the fiasco, there was the lost decade. There were crazy expenses, and we reached 300% inflation, and 25% of GDP was designated for intelligence, for security. I'm sorry, and the whole economy collapsed. And they came up with another program, and then and ever since it improved. The security budget was decreased. So you have to think about this as well. Everybody saw what happened to us. Everybody saw Radwan forces. So it's quite dangerous what happened to us with the tunnels, for example. We built a fence, so they wanted to be able to penetrate, and nobody managed to penetrate to cross it. But if you want to build, for example, if let's say we won't have an agreement with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah will have drones, he will be able to attack Tel Aviv. Don't think about past incidents. Think about the enemy's potential. I don't know what the IDF has done or technology. There are new emerging threats. And we need to develop capabilities to confront the future threats. Don't just trust a certain perimeter. So, and there are also budgetary limitations, manpower limitations. You cannot do it all. So you need to do risk management in smart decision making. All of this could be done while you're looking into the future. Beware of people who are too experienced. Actually, so sometimes you need to be open-minded. Last comment, Dan Shomron in 86-87, I was the head of a committee in the Knesset, and the chief of staff presented to us the multi-annual plan, and I went home and I was very happy. 2 weeks later, the financial advisor tells me, well, actually we don't have budget for it. So we went to Abba Evan and we wrote two things: that we need precise guided munition and unmanned aircraft. And I submitted the report, and I remember the reaction of a person I really appreciated, Dan Shomron. He said there's no such a thing as a military of buttons, and he's a good man, he's an excellent man, but he did not understand the importance of change. So it's harder to listen to criticism. So think that there are people who fought for this homeland, and some of them, some people are not relevant anymore. You need to look into the future. The ability to predict the future changes, and not only think about the past. Just an example. For example, think about where is the next drone. Think like adapt this way of thinking, line of thinking. So we'll end here. Thank you so much, all the participants, all the panelists. Thank you.